So I know a lot of us in the Thomas fandom have no intention of watching this. And usually in this fanbase we see people shitting on this reboot and everything it stands for, which... Okay, Val, what in the fuck is this? But today I'm going to do something different. Today I'm going to be going over what it would be like if All Engines Go followed the canon of the first 2 books of the Railway series, meaning I'm going to be seeing if stories from the original Railway series books can be adapted into All Engines Go while still keeping most of the story beats and the order in which they are told intact. So, without further delay, here's how I'd make All Engines Go and the Railway series mix into a coherent and good story. There might not be a lot of changes between All Engines Go and the Railway series because they are honestly really easy to adapt, but we'll see how they can get adapted soon, and if the All Engines Go can add a unique take to it. So, first things first, let's establish our main criteria. We won't change anything from what All Engines Go is set out to be. This means that Thomas and the others stay children, Gordon stays an adult, and probably Emily. The engines use the railway as their playground to learn and play, but also work when necessary, and the bouncing and abilities to take their bodies away from the rails all stay intact. As long as I stick to these criteria, I can do whatever I want with the series as long as it stays within Railway series canon and is able to branch off into All Engines Go without it feeling too different from what's intended. So, how would we adapt the 3 railway engines into an All Engines Go episode? Considering this series is to focus on Thomas and his friends, while others take a backseat, how will we establish Edward, Gordon, and Henry? Well, let's imagine that these Railway series stories are going to be used to create an Adventure Begin style movie to come out for All Engines Go. There is an All Engines Go movie coming out later in 2021. So, let's pretend like we are writing for that movie. We begin with Gordon, now being portrayed as a father figure, telling a story to the younger engines, Thomas, Connor, Percy, James, Diesel, Nia, etc., of him and his past on Sir Topham Hatt's railway. Gordon explains how he was once young and prideful, and he worked with many other engines. 2 of those engines were his old friends Edward and Henry. Talks about how he and Henry used to pick on Edward for being small and old, and how he regrets it after seeing Edward back in action, helping him up his hill, and he also talks about how Sir Topham Hatt wasn't always the joke he was now, when he describes how Henry got locked up into his tunnel. Now these stories seem fairly easy to adapt into All Engines Go. There's nothing that these 3 engines do that would be really out of place, especially if the show wants to have Thomas and his friends learn in order to help the children at home learn valuable life lessons. And honestly, what better way to start from the very beginning with Gordon, the main father figure of the engines, telling stories from his younger days, and learning valuable lessons about humility, perseverance, and proper work etiquette and behavior. I think especially in this day and age, with how these kids sometimes act up, I think this would be very, very, very good lessons to teach to children. They were good lessons to teach back then, and they are good lessons to teach now. Now, when Henry's trying to avoid raindrops, he would try and rise and bounce around any droplet of rain that he can when it's drizzling, but once it starts pouring, he would probably rush into the tunnel and try his hardest to avoid the rain. But as a result, he would probably be bumping around his coaches of passengers, and they would probably find that ride very uncomfortable. But we can keep that to show exactly why Sir Topham Hatt and the other engines are so annoyed with him. Now, the other engines would try their hardest to get him out the tunnel, but Henry won't budge. Eventually, Sir Topham Hatt gets sick of him, and he would send him to be shut off into the tunnel. And he would send Gordon and Edward to continue Henry's work themselves. Now, this would shock the little engines, and it wouldn't shock James because, well, I'm going to keep James in the story. I'm deciding to make James be slightly older than the rest of the others. He would probably be about adolescent teenager when everyone else is more along the lines of a 5th grader. Meanwhile, James would probably be a middle schooler. Of course, the sad story of Henry has a happy ending when Gordon bursts his safety valve and Sir Topham Hatt needs Henry and another engine to help pull the express. Edward and Henry push and pull the express together, and all is well between the 3 engines, and they are now firm friends. When Gordon is done telling his story, the young engines are in awe and are extremely happy that Gordon told them about him and his old friends. But Thomas is still a bit confused as to why Gordon told them the story anyway. Gordon tells them that he told them this story because because he's trying to tell them the 3 morals of how to be very useful engines. And those are to always work hard, always keep your head up no matter who's against you, never get into trouble you can avoid, and always work together. Of course, all stories with the overlapping moral of never giving up and never giving in. This encourages Thomas and the rest of the little engines to be the best engines they can be, which is exactly what Thomas says he wants to do in the promos for All Engines Go. So you're probably thinking, Apollo, you just said that you would keep bouncing intact. So why doesn't Gordon just bounce up and, go high above his hill? Well, first of all, Gordon at this point is still big and prideful, and he would probably find that actions to be too childish and too beneath him. Not to mention, he is a big engine, so he would probably be way too heavy to do that over the hill anyway. It would probably send him careening back because of the weight, or it would send him plummeting forward, and he would probably end up crashing either way. I would like to have at least a little bit of realism in mind, even though a lot of people think that All Engines Go doesn't want to have that. You're also probably wondering, Apollo, if the drivers and firemen don't exist, why doesn't Edward just go work on the railway anyway? It's not like he has any workers to tell him he can't go out. Well, as I said it before, Sir Topham Hatt is still their boss, so I feel as if he would be the one that tells them what to do. He simply hasn't given Edward a job in a long time, and he finally allows Edward to work again after he sees the other engines making fun of him. Now, assuming Nelvana is going to want to keep the track record for Mattel not wanting Edward and Henry in the show anymore, they most likely won't appear as much as Gordon, so they'll just have to be staying as background characters that are sometimes mentioned in old stories. But how are we going to adapt Thomas the Tank Engine where Henry and Edward are still very much in that plot? Well, you'll see. Now, how would All Engines Go cover the iconic stories of Thomas the Tank Engine? Well, first of all, Thomas and his friends would be so inspired by Gordon's stories that they would want to be really helpful and really useful right away. But Thomas finds himself getting into trouble doing so, while the other engines find ease. Thomas's personality would be similar to the kind, well-meaning one we're going in, and the ones that we see for All Engines Go, other than the whole cheeky thing. But I think I will want to add some cheekiness to him because, let's face it, children are fucking assholes. One day, after working hard, Thomas would find it funny to wake Gordon up from his nap after he was taking the express. Gordon, who is upset by this, decides that he needs to teach Thomas a lesson in manners and not letting your pride get the better of you. In this adaptation, Gordon would probably be the Edward of the series, being the older father figure, as I've said twice now. I feel as if Gordon will be wiser, but he would also teach lessons in a way that is a lot more harder than Edward would, because he knows just how thick these engine skulls can be, as his once was too. The next morning, when Thomas is set to bring Gordon his coaches, he's extremely tired, most likely because the night before, he was up all night dreaming and thinking about how many ways he could be a very useful and reliable engine. Gordon couples himself up to the express, and just when Thomas does the same to help him start, Gordon goes so fast that Thomas doesn't have time or the strength to uncouple himself, taking him all the way down to his station until he stops, and Thomas is exhausted and in need of a lot of water. Gordon explains to Thomas what hard work truly is, apologizes for the rough lesson, and Thomas learns, and by extension, the audience learns, that just because you work hard doesn't mean other people are not working just as hard as you in different ways, which is a lesson I think a lot of children need to learn nowadays. Now, Thomas would try and pull away from the express train, but without his driver or firemen, it would be difficult. And just him and his childish body trying to pull back on Gordon's giant-ass body, it would prove to be extremely hard, and that wouldn't be enough to stop him no matter how much he bounces or holds himself back. So, since Thomas can now turn around and clearly see when he isn't pulling a train, how would Thomas's train go at all? Let's start with Henry. Since Henry is an older engine and his build is incredibly messed up, Henry is unable to work with his train for the day. I'd say in this version he still is an experiment. Secondly, we highlight more of Thomas's childlike innocence and behavior to get himself going. Thomas is able to couple up things properly, unlike in the original book. But because of his overly rowdy nature and how much he plays around, rocking and rolling about and rising off the tracks, the coupling, like the chain that connects him to the train itself, to the trucks itself, loosens and undoes itself in the middle of the railway. Thomas thinks it all becomes easy and he's the best and most hardworking little engine again, but when he turns around again and sees his train is gone, he feels a lot of regret and he's very sad that he failed. The passengers left in the middle of the track would be talking about how much a bad railway it is, and Sir Topham Hatt just so happens to be on said train. Sir Topham Hatt and the rest of the passengers are at first livid with Thomas, but when they come back and see just how sad he is, they are sorry for him and they decide that he deserves a second chance. Not to mention, they notice how, because he's so young, it was something that he honestly probably didn't even mean to do. Now it's time to try and handle Thomas and the trucks. How would that go? Well, first of all, according to the teaser trailers that we've seen and that I've seen, the trucks don't exactly seem to be alive. So we can probably cross off the trucks being troublesome and purposely causing crashes in this version of the story. Since we've established already that Edward and Henry are now canon in our versions of All Engines Go and why they would be where Thomas is working, Thomas actually meets Edward for the first time here. And when Edward heard about Thomas's want to become great, his kindness and love for Thomas's enthusiasm would lead him to asking Thomas if he would like to pull his goods train while Edward works on something else, since he sees that Thomas is so eager. Thomas would swiftly agree, but Edward remembers to tell Thomas that too much trucks can be heavy and troublesome to deal with. When Thomas first starts, it's all going fine. Trucks bump him here and there because of their heaviness, but overall he's doing pretty okay, until his braggadocious nature about pulling the train so young, while everyone else is still working on their training or still working in the yard, gets the better of him. And suddenly, when he's going across a turn or a hill, the trucks get really heavy and they start to malfunction when Thomas takes them. He goes too fast down the line, and when he arrives at Edward's station, everyone, including Sir Topham Hatt, is confused. Sir Topham Hatt explains how pulling trucks can be hard and that Thomas should learn to be more careful, and since he's so young, he shouldn't even be working with them this early in the first place. You have a gag that makes Sir Topham Hatt feel like a joke. Maybe he trips and falls while going to talk to Edward about doing what he did again, and the episode ends with Thomas and the viewers learning a lesson not to bite off more than you can chew. It also leads off a second lesson that adults can't just let children handle big things when they're clearly not ready and when they need to be guided. Now, at the end of this section, Gordon would come up and chastise Thomas for what he had done, but also say that he's proud of him for not giving up even though he made a mistake in making things right. And Henry would also come up to Thomas and tell him how he's very happy that his passengers got to where they needed to go safely. He would also say that Thomas, with the way that he's going and the way that he's learning how to be better, is soon going to be a very useful engine when he's older. I feel as if Gordon will often tell the lesson at the end of the segments just so kids can get the idea. And just because I know that the target demographic is going to be even younger this time around, so yeah, we need to get things extra clarified in this case. Now it's finally time for the last story. It's time to talk about Thomas and the breakdown train. How would a young Thomas help an adolescent James when his train goes haywire? Well, when Gordon is taking Thomas to play with the trucks in the yard, he notices Carly the crane, which we all know from the promos that she's a crane engine with wheels now. So I feel like she could function as a breakdown crane in this version. Gordon explains what a crane is and how important it is, and how it can be used to help trains who have derailed. Thomas would mention how he would like to be helpful like that, and he finally gets his chance when James is really upset about going down the line. Thomas notices that James's trucks have something wrong with them, and there's something wrong with James's brakes too. They're going way too fast. Earlier in the movie, we can establish that they are wooden brakes, and they have a risk to catch fire. Thomas rushes to see what happened, and when he sees James's crash, he goes to get Carly and tells her that he needs help. They go after James, At first, everyone is confused as to why Thomas is going out the yard with Carly, but when they see James saved from his crash, Sir Topham Hatt and the other engines are elated. And all of the adult engines give Thomas a lot of praise. Since he's so young in this version, I don't think I'm going to be giving him a branch line or Annie and Clarabelle. Although, I doubt that coaches will be sentient if the trucks aren't even sentient themselves. James is grateful that he has such a good friend in Thomas. The adult engines are very happy with how much Thomas has already grown despite his many mistakes, and they're more than happy to praise him and make him happy in return. Since James is already red, he doesn't get a new red coat, but he does get new metal brakes. Now, wait a minute, Apollo. In Thomas and the Trucks, in your version at least, Thomas could shake the goods trains off with the force that he was rocking and rolling. Why doesn't James just shake off his trucks? Well, I've decided to have rocking and rolling be something that trains have to learn. It doesn't come simple, and it doesn't come easy and natural. Thomas just so happens to have it down packed very young. That's one of his talents. James, on the other hand, doesn't. And with the speed he was going and the way his brakes were failing, I don't think he would have had time to go through the air anyway. Thomas's ability to be able to rock and roll this easily could be the reason why he is a little bit more cheeky. Also, yeah, it sucks that Annie and Clarabelle aren't in the story at the end, but if the trucks aren't sentient, then I'm not sure if All Engines Go will have coaches be sentient either. It's always been debated in the Thomas fandom anyway, how some coaches have faces and some don't. So I'm going to have to go with this choice. Unless somehow All Engines Go introduce young children coaches, which I have no clue how that would work or what they would have to learn. How to get used to people sitting in them, I guess. Or if Thomas somehow has to pull around 2 adult coaches being his little child self, well, that'll be something that we all just have to wait and see. So that's how I would adapt the first 2 Audrey books into All Engines Go. It's a shame that All Engines Go most likely won't be doing this, as they have a bare minimum understanding of the characters and most likely never even read these books or seen the original episodes based off of them. But these stories are literally so easy to adapt in All Engines Go and barely change except for some minor details. If I ever make another video handling the rest of this special, for example, handling what to do between the engines like Percy, Emily, Diesel, and Nia, well, that would be something for another day and something that would probably involve a lot more thought, as that would probably need to be an entire separate B plot on its own from the usual A plot, which would be handling the Reverend W. Audrey books. All in all Engines Go, Nelvana, Mattel, making things based off the Railway series is not that hard. With how they're saying Thomas will always be the hero, and how he'll always act excitable and childish, and how it's going to be a musical, the series will probably be incredibly formulaic with how Thomas is going to act, and how everyone else is going to act. Even though, as a character, he will most likely need to fail and be a brat at almost everything. Although, from the promos and them saying that Thomas will always make the right decision, and how being the morally right one isn't always that easy, the way that they're probably going to make Thomas act kinder than he ever was is not a good sign. I worry for everyone working on this show, and I really hope that they don't get a lot of hate, because Lord knows that the show gets a lot of hate. And good night, Tri-State area. I can't believe I spent this long talking about this series and I'm probably not even going to watch. Goodbye.